I was thinking about how do you satirize the current moment without necessarily being so specific? How do you think about it? Sort of in the difference of how do you think about the weather versus how do you think about the climate? So I was trying to figure out, was there something about the climate of our current political system, the larger systems at play and how those systems are incentivized that create the kinds of outcomes that we're finding, the sort of more corrupted outcomes. So rather than sort of focusing on, a Trump-like figure or a political figure that's taken off, you try and think about it from a systems perspective. It really is about the current system of where is the money? How is the money incentivized, whether it be for the media or for the political parties? What is it that's corrupting and polluting the kinds of discourse and outcomes and policies that might arise from that? And where does that money go, and how is it used for its own influence, and how does the system protect itself? I would just like it if people walked away from it thinking about the system as a whole and the outcomes that we get when we allow the entire system to become sort of self-propagating, and that the financial incentives are for very negative outcomes. It's like Titans battling on the mortal coil. You know what I mean? Like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, this is just a small town, and they bring in their the entire weight of those two political machines, and they sort of, it's Batman versus Superman. It's these two titans battling on, and it's that sense of like, you're destroying all these buildings around here, right? But they're locked in their battle. And when their battle is over, they move on, and everyone else has to sort of rebuild whatever it was that they plowed over during their fight, and they kind of just moved to the next town. Steve was really the only, I really did write this for him and with him in mind. And so I'm very glad that he wanted to do it. Because it's a difficult character, because it's, what do you do with someone that who might believe in what they're doing ideologically, who might be very principled, but they live in a world that is less principled, and what does that do to them? He's one of the few people that I've ever met who could play all those different notes, from the comedy to the more serious parts, but also you still, there's a certain sadness to his life. Like, his life is about trying to get money for these things that he believes in, and he pays a big price for that as well. That character is just all about integrity. And that's the way I always viewed Chris. He's just one of those guys that he does great work, and then he goes and he lives where he wants to live, and he doesn't play the game. And he's had a background in Texas and in farming, and he just, I wanted somebody that had a little bit of this in their being, in their DNA. And I felt like he was a great person to have that, forgetting about all the, just as a great actor, but he was able to bring a firmness to it. Rose is, it's funny. She came in, we'd all been working for about 2 weeks when she was able to come in. And the first scene was her kind of marching back and forth in front of the camera, trying to make sure that she got the analytics people that Gary was going to get, and she wanted to make sure. And she goes, "Look, man, if he wants to take a stand in Turdsville, USA, then I say let's bury him here." She realizes that all the people from the town are in the office at the time, and she just turns. And I was like, if you could just turn and like maybe hit the mark at that moment, because we only had one camera on her, and just dead on, just go, "Not a turd, heart and soul of America." Keep walking, but like she just nails it like each time, and then did and added her own flourishes and all those things. I was like, oh, I'm dealing with an all-star. That's what's great about having people like Topher and Natasha in there, is when you write something, you write it in a vacuum. And a lot of times it's really not written for performance. It's written for what's in your head. So when it comes alive with the actors, you're like, oh, you're going to do a lot of that writing with just your face. I should probably take some of this writing out. So I can remove things that are extraneous or redundant, and then they fill it in with great dynamics between the characters. So they create much fuller and layered comedy and scene work than I could have created just in what I'd written. I really love this process. Having come from sort of topical and daily television, which was really fun and challenging in its own way, but forgiving in the sense that, okay, Monday's show kind of sucked, but Tuesday will be fine, or Wednesday, and it just keeps going. And in some ways, this is a more emotional process because you work on something for such a long time before it's realized. And then as it's being realized, you bring in people like Grace Yoon and Alex Bovard and Bobby Bukowski, and they elevate what you had written through production design and costume and cinematography. And watching that happen after spending so much time with it just kind of alone is a really, it's emotional. It's kind of invigorating, like all this time, and you just have these 30 days to get it all done. And watching everybody come together, and the actors and the set and all those things, elevating it is, yeah, it's very exciting. I took great care in running this by a lot of people that are in that world to make sure that it met the test of believability. That in the realm of possibility in our current environment and political system, is this realistic in the sense of the motivations of the consultants that come in, and in the machinations that take place within it, and the types of financial commitments and other things that can occur. And so I tried to very much calibrate it to those realities so that if you step back from it and think about what its intentions are, that those are realistic. And so that was the starting point, is that this had to be realistic, that this could occur. And, you know, none of them, if anything, they just got sad as they would read it and just go, yeah, that could happen. You know, there was never any like, no way, that's nuts, that would never happen. It was more like, yeah, I could see that. That's when I knew that I was finding the right range. There is a concerted effort to make it that there is a right and a left, and it's the only way to view it. And that viewing it from the perspective of integrity versus corruption might be a more accurate frame to look at it, but it's a more difficult frame for them to sell. Red blue is a lot easier to sell than, yeah, that's an interesting point, but that might not be. And watching the conversation, look, there's a whole industry that exists to take issues and make them indecipherable to the average person, to just use language to manipulate whichever you want without getting the real facts of it out to people. And unless we have a guardian that is as tenacious as those that are seeking power, we're going to continue to find ourselves in these kinds of situations.